Welcome back to Fade to Chat, the golden age of cinema. We're going to have some fun tonight with this episode. Well, maybe. We're going to talk about what is considered a really funny film. And I'll have stories about my experience of it, and everybody will have stories about it. It's the Marx Brothers, Lee and Leo McCarey, the director, Duck Soup from 1933. So we're going to look at some of the trivia that's associated with it, give our kind of general reactions to the different parts of it. But come along with us on this ride. I think you'll have fun. If you've seen this movie, and if you haven't seen this movie, you might be compelled to take a look at it. So joining us, and part of my co-host is here, Cindy. Why don't you give a little introduction?
Sure. Hi, Marty. I'm a retired art educator, and I love old movies, most of them. And I always look forward to sharing. I have to say that I really look forward to sharing my point of view with you. And I always say this is the best homework I've ever had. I feel a little differently about this movie today, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we talk about it.
And with us, joining as a guest, is Stephanie Marder, who is in and part of Circular Firing Squad, another podcast that I do. And I kind of said, who do we have that might be interested in talking about an old movie? And Stephanie, of course, came to mind, and she said, Duck Soup. I'd like to talk about Duck Soup. So, Stephanie, go ahead and give an introduction.
Hi, I am Steph Marder. I am a counselor and by trade, and I, like Marty said, I am a regular on Circular Firing Squad, and I really appreciated Marty reaching out to me and asking me, because I don't know if I always give off, hey, I know some old movie vibes. And, Duck Soup was one that I watched in middle school or early high school. And so I was like, oh, that's one I can say. There were a couple others, but, I appreciate it being the topic today, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, I think we're going to have some fun. My experience of Duck Soup started in my in college, when at the time I think the Marx Brothers were having a revival. They kind of had a revival back in the 70s. And as an undergraduate, I took aesthetic English, and so a whole group of people who wanted to avoid writing long papers for any other type of general liberal arts program decided that they would join. We would get together in an auditorium a couple of times a week and watch old classic movies. And this is one that came up in that class, and it was the first time I had seen it. It's considered, I think, one of the movies that captures the best of the Marx Brothers in terms of their vaudevillian kind of approach and their wackiness, and you can see a lot of that in the film in terms of timing. I will tell you, you sit and you watch this movie, you watch the movie in a theater by yourself, it's maybe not so funny. You watch it in a theater with a bunch of other people, and the parts that you think aren't funny, that you wouldn't laugh at, somebody else is laughing at. Mm-hmm. So the mise en scene is, there's always laughter going on during the movie. So it makes the movie maybe a lot more funnier than it is for you just watching it solo. Let's get general impressions. I hadn't seen this film in a while. So Cindy made the assignment last week in terms of let's try this movie. And you suggested it, and it's something you've never seen. So talk about your general impressions.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, Marty, because sitting and watching the movie by myself, I thought to myself, do you just not get it? What is wrong with you? I watched it. I watched it, I think, 4 times, just like I did Lawrence of Arabia. And each time I thought, okay, yeah, it got a little bit better, but um, maybe it would be different for me in a large theater with a group of people. And my initial reaction was, it was just so full of one-liners and joke after joke after joke after joke. And I thought, is this all it is? And it kind of left me feeling like I didn't really get the plot of it. And I had to go back and think, okay, what was this movie really about? It was just one joke after another. And I kind of got tired of it, to be honest with you. The saving grace for me was Harpo. He was my favorite in the entire movie.
Let's
I
talk.
got I got yeah, I got tired of Groucho. I just got tired of it. Mhm.
Yeah. I think something we can do during the show is kind of talk about our impressions of each of the characters, each of the Marx Brothers, and the meaning with that. Stephanie,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts?
So I have mixed thoughts. I remember now that I don't think I finished it when I was in middle school. So it was nice to kind of come back and watch the whole thing, and especially now, several decades later. So on one hand, I agree with Cindy a little bit, where it's just like, but that's kind of the point of the Marx Brothers. I mean, you're talking
Mhm.
about plot, and this probably has more of a plot to their to any of the movies that they released, at least up until that point. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is just a showcase for their act, but then they started, so it's a very loose plot, and yes, it doesn't make sense. It's all nonsensical. Um, Also watching it, I think I had been desensitized a bit to a lot of the gags and a lot of the jokes that were
Mhm.
in there because they've been done so many times. And so I tried
Mhm.
to go think back because I was like, but this is like source material, even though even the mirror scene uh, had been a vaudeville act beforehand. It's not like they just they
Yeah.
popularized it. They made it part of pop culture. But appreciating all of those different pieces and how it's influenced it's just so much of comedy today and over the years. I think it's kind of that dichotomy where you're like, "Ugh, I'm over it, but also, oh my God, this was the beginning."
Mhm.
Well, let's give a little information as part of the show. It was Duck Soup. Actually, there were 3 or 4 other working titles. They had done Horse Feathers before, and they were trying to keep. At one time, they said we're going to try and keep this animal theme throughout it. But I think the other titles were Firecracker, and it was one of them, and then Ooh La La was another title. These were all working titles at some point, and but they went with Duck Soup, which is themed around. It's kind of a statement that says it's easy peasy. It's duck soup.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
but it also stayed with the animal theme. Leo McCarey was the director. It's written by Bert Kalmar and Harry Ruby. I saw a version that was shown on TCM because I had kind of DVR'd that TCM, and they talked a bit about how difficult the writing was. I guess Ben Mankiewicz's grandfather was part of the production team and said that it was hellish, in particular with Groucho being very demanding and very controlling with it. Stars Groucho Marx, Harpo Marx, Chico Marx, Zeppo Marx, and I think his only film appearance
Mhm.
in a Marx Brothers film. Margaret Dumont, who is always the fall person in the Marx Brothers films, Louis Calhern, and Raquel Torres were also part of the main characters. Paramount Pictures runs 68 minutes. It is a black and white, but it's pre-code comedy, which those dirty
Yes.
innuendos they were able to get past the censors, which and it's kind of defined as a political satire There are a couple lines in there that made me laugh out loud that wouldn't have made me laugh out loud 10 years ago, because they're kind of meaningful for what's happening now. And the idea that it was kind of a musical farce, I think they were getting it. And this just came into my head. This feels sort of like a Gilbert and Sullivan
Mm.
performance, with all different kind of genres mixed in, including Negro spiritual at some point, which I thought culturally, culturally that wouldn't fly these days.
Mhm.
I don't know. Any other thoughts or comments about that?
Well, I think hearing both of your points of view, I think I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. My first watch, I was totally over it and thought, why did I even suggest this movie? But then as I watched it again, and again, you know me, Marty, I did research and I
Yeah.
looked behind, I looked a little deeper, and I was like, okay, now I get it. I get it. But to me, when I first watched it, it was like, it was so superficial and I just didn't understand it. But I had a deeper appreciation for it the second, third, fourth time I watched it. But it's not going to be a go to movie for me. It's not going to
Yeah.
be one of my all time favorites. But that being said, I enjoyed parts of it. It's just not my
Yeah.
brand of movie that I enjoy over and over again.
Stephanie,
It's
what
just not
is
for
this?
everyone.
Is this something you could show your daughter?
Oh, and I can and I will. Um, I I do think it's important. I think there was some comfort for me to your point, Marty, that it's so relevant now. So it's like, okay, this kind of stuff and these ideas have been, around a long time, along with the people making fun of the political, socio-political situations. And, you know, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it makes me feel better or worse. That it could just be plopped into today and work, because it does work on so many levels, and I think that's something that impressed me the most is how it stands up over time overall, um, minus a few things. And I really had very, very little issue with a lot of what was going on as far as the appropriateness of jokes or what they were the topics that they were joking about. I think there it was more modern than maybe it was given credit for even, but it holds up pretty well, which is actually kind of shocking.
Yeah, it was harder for me to get through this film, this
Mm.
time than probably previous times in my life, and I had to kind of sort of get into the rhythm that this is going to have music infused in it. And when
Mhm.
Cindy said last show that we did, well, let's do Duck Soup. It's on my list. I said, how do you feel about operatic chorus? Because there was, and she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So I'm curious, how did the music settle with you, Cindy?
I actually didn't mind the music. There wasn't enough of it to be. Um, it was entertaining. I enjoyed the first part, especially with the ballet dancers and the big staircase scene. I thought that was funny, because it was just so over the top. And the one I really loved was the little marching band that came in when they were going to the war. We're going to the war scene, and they played the men's helmets. The
Yeah.
All three of them, they banged on their helmets like they were playing a xylophone. I thought that was hysterical. That was probably one of my favorite parts. And then as they were leaving, the band's leaving, they're marching off, kind of like little ducks in a row, like if you're in a shooting gallery, and they're marching by you. And of course, Harpo, he's got his scissors out and he's just snipping off those plumes one by one. And that was all choreographed to the music. So that I found very, very funny. I enjoyed that part. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get that was all the part of the direction of Leo McCarey. Obviously,
Hmm.
there that was kind of a lot of the stuff that we're saying, that we'll talk about was worked out in the writers' room.
Hmm.
But yeah, I Hail Fredonia, and it was harder for me to get through the musical sequences um, in this watch for me. Um,
I could do without the Hail Fredonia every time.
yeah,
It was a
yeah,
little much.
yeah.
Hmm.
That's why
Stephanie,
they
do you
got the
have?
tomatoes.
That's what?
That's why they got the tomatoes by the end. No one could
Oh
stand it.
yeah, everybody got tomatoed with the Hail Fredonia. Any other comments in terms of how the music or how the design of this film fit for you?
It was funny you mentioned the ballet dancers because I wrote down, why are there always ballet dancers in these movies? Because it just made me think of The Wizard of Oz and just,
Hmm.
in Munchkin Land and all the, just as part of these numbers, we're going to have ballet dancers. We'll throw them in. And, oh, I thought it's funny too with Leo McCreary doing such a great job with the direction and finding these clever uh, ways to integrate and pull everything together and make everything work because from my understanding he did not really want to direct this movie. He kind of got strong armed into it, so the fact that something came out that is so has is we're talking about it almost 100 years later. that's
Hmm.
that's pretty impressive. And I like the music. I think it's fun because it is so over the top and ridiculous. I like Gilbert and Sullivan, so that probably has something to do with it. Um, and also, I think it also shows, as great as it is, I was maybe with the movies today, too perfectionistic in some ways, or because I could notice a lot of ways things were off, even though it was done so well, just by like standards today. So that kind of stuck out to me. If that make I don't, just some of the editing or just the way people move sometimes, I was just like, oh, I don't know if that would make it into a movie today that was trying to do the
Hmm,
same thing.
yeah. I am stuck on this line. I can't remember it. I can remember parts of it, but there was a second line that came right after that. In this movie, one of the parts of his counsel, uh, one of the guys stands up and says, "I need to talk about the tariffs,"
Yeah, yeah.
and then he
Oh,
says,
yeah.
that goes under new business." And then they
Hmm.
go, "Is there any new business?" There is no new business, and the guy stands up and says, "Or that goes under new business." And
Old
then
business.
now it's old business, so we're not going to
Hmm.
talk about it.
Hmm.
And then there was another political link. I can't remember what it was. That was right after that, and I thought, how did they know our society was going to be like this so many
Hmm.
years ahead? That this would still
That's
be
true.
relevant? Yeah.
What also stuck right before the talk was they're just watching him play jacks. They're all
Yeah.
just watching him intently playing jacks. And that I thought was kind of fitting.
Yeah.
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 Good point.
Um, yeah. Any other comments, Cindy?
Well, there was, like I said, I have so many. I know we're going to talk about the mirror scene, and I have quite a few comments about that, even as it
Let's
relates to
talk about
other.
it. Let's
Want to
let's just
talk
go ahead
about
and
that?
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Oh, sure. Well, of course, we all know that mirror scene is, classic vaudeville. It's been done. That wasn't the first time it was done. Um, I watched that two, three times. Me, I had to watch it again. It's like, okay, what did I see? What made sense to me? What's happening here? Who is who? Because at some point I got them mixed up. It was so good. I got them mixed up because it was really all three of them. All three of them were dressed as Groucho, which is another one of those. How did they do that? They just happen to have three nightshirts, three caps, three cigars. They could all impersonate him. And Harpo smashes into that mirror, and it breaks, it shatters all over the place, and then suddenly there is no mirror. There's no glass, there's no nothing. It's just this beautiful big open space. And I thought, okay, There is no mirror, Cindy. Get that through your head. There is no mirror. It's him in another room. And that's been done, as we said, many times. And I did some research to see where else have I seen this.
Huh.
Are you aware of some of the other places it's
I,
occurred?
I know that it has occurred in other movies. Maybe Stephanie knows what movies, but it's sort of like it's killing me now. I'm
Okay.
glad you did the research.
Well, the first one, and this one came to my mind right away, was I Love Lucy. She
Okay.
and Ricky, yeah, she's saying, yeah, yeah. She and Ricky were out in Hollywood, and Ricky was doing a screen test or something. And Lucy was always fascinated with celebrities. And Harpo Marx came up to their hotel room, and, he had his trench coat on, of course, his blonde hair. And Lucy dressed up as him. She put on a blonde wig and she put on her trench coat. And there was a whole scene in the hotel room. It's like a little folding partition door, and they were behind it. And they did a whole scene just like that, where they came in and out and dropped the hat and made faces. And then of course finally she messed up, and
Huh.
the gag was over. But that's the first one that came to my mind, was Lucy. There was another one on Gilligan's Island, where somebody got onto the island, and he looked just like Gilligan. He was his double, and they couldn't figure that out for a while. And there was a scene with the two of them. Believe it or not, Bugs Bunny had one.
Uh,
You know that one. I love cartoons. Bugs Bunny had one with Elmer Fudd, where he actually made him believe that he was a rabbit, and he's pulling on his ears, and Elmer Fudd's pulling on his ears. That was called Hair Tonic. Tom and Jerry had one where Tom actually jumped into the mirror, and there was an evil Tom that he was going back and forth with, an evil Tom. And then the Patty Duke Show.
hmm.
Of course, it was the same person.
Yeah.
Patty and her cousin Kathy were the same person, but in the opening credits, they show the two of them doing a very similar scene where they're impersonating each other.
Wow.
And I had to go back and watch that. I'm like, oh yeah, Patty Duke, because I used to watch that show when I was younger.
It sounds almost like you enjoyed going back and looking at these clips more than you enjoyed the movie.
Well, sort of. Yeah. Like I said, I like doing the research behind it, and just seeing all the other ones that were available. But I enjoyed the mirror scene.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephanie, why don't you weigh in on this if you have anything to say about the mirror scene?
Well, the first note I had on it, sorry about my notebook, was, my first thought was this origin of that mirror gag. But obviously I did a little research too, because I was just too curious. And no, and it makes sense. It's all from vaudeville. And then there was someone who put it in a movie 14 years earlier, but I forgot to write that down. The cartoons, Warner Brothers, for sure. I mean, Tom and Jerry as well, but all the Warner Brothers. I mean, that's where I think I first probably saw most of this stuff that carried over. So I thought that was just interesting how you know, it all came out in those cartoons, but they're all part of the same group in a way.
Mm.
So the voice actors, the animators, and this part, like the Marx, that's what they had in common, I think, in a lot of ways. And I bet they bonded over Marx Brother movies when they were writing the scripts for the
Yeah, but
animation.
how late were those animated movies? I mean, were they back in like the 30s or 40s? And I guess my question is, and we don't know the answer to it, it's rhetorical. Did they kind of pull this gag out because it's such a universal gag and put it in
Mm-hmm.
cartoons where kids would see it, where they normally wouldn't go to the movie and see the Marx Brothers films? I don't know.
Probably. Probably.
Anything else noticeable about the mirror scene?
It Okay, am I committing a sin here? But it's starting to lose a little steam by the end.
Mm,
The synchronization wasn't quite as crisp
Hmm.
as it was, but I was also just thinking like, oh well, he's just doing his best to catch up,
Yeah,
and to really just mirror what was going on without knowing what was coming next. But I think in the beginning it seemed a little more choreographed intentionally, and
yeah.
then
mm,
they just kind of kept going. Right.
Yeah, for me, I liked the way they broke plane at one point where Groucho kind of steps through the opening. They're staring at each other and he steps back out
mhm,
of the opening again. And that is interesting in terms of how it changes the effect from just being mimicked. And then the thing that makes me laugh every time is when Groucho thinks he's going to fool his reflection by spinning around really quick and then sticking his hands out like
yeah.
jazz hands. And it is it is Harpo in that scene that's doing it, and
Mhm.
Harpo just
He
lets him go
doesn't.
around and then does the jazz hands
Uh,
because he knows he
yeah.
can't see the mirror when he's turning around. Yeah, I, this is a scene that I will watch over and over again. Not that it's not that the movie's my favorite, but if I see this scene, it's like I got to watch this because I
Hmm.
want to watch the stylized. And this speaks to the Marx Brothers experience in vaudeville and how the timing of what they did made them so successful. I'm going to go to another scene and ask you about that, which is, and I've just lost it, which is the peanut and lemonade stand scene. I've seen that and I've rerun it and I watched again this morning and I'm still trying to figure out the timing because there's so much misdirection.
Hmm.
Like Harpo has his hand in a customer's pocket and the customer gets really offended. And if you're paying attention to that, but you don't notice he also has his hand in God, I forget the actor's name.
Right.
He's been a
Peanut.
foil.
Yeah. Who was that?
Uh,
Begins with an
oh,
E, I think.
Edward? No.
Edward or Edgar. Let's see.
yeah.
Um.
So, anyways, he's got his hand in the lemonade salesman's pocket at the same time, and you don't realize that till the action with the customer, where he's taking the money out of his pocket, and the customer comes back and grabs it, and then you realize he's got his hands in the lemonade salesman's pocket too. So it just the timing, the whole thing with putting, he raises his leg and he puts it under someone's hand who's hanging there, holding their hand at their side, and I guess instinctually they just keep their hand. They hold on to the leg. I just I'm pretty amazed by watching how all of that plays out.
Edgar Kennedy, by the way.
Edgar Kennedy, and
Yes.
he's a foil for
Hmm.
the Marx Brothers in many of their films. Thanks for that, Steph.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go around and ask any impressions that you have on that particular scene.
Well, I will agree with you, Maury. That again, it sounds like I know in the beginning I said this was not one of my favorite movies, but that scene I thought was really great. And I was kind of like the vendor at the end. I was like ready to pull my hair out. It's like there were so many things to watch, and throwing the hat in the stand and burning it, and sticking his hand in this pocket, and then cutting off. Harpo cut off his pocket at one point and put peanuts in it.
Peanuts.
And kept you know it's like, oh my gosh, he cut off the pocket, then he's filling it up with peanuts. And the hats, I couldn't keep track of the hats. How many hats did they have? And
Yeah.
he kept switching hats, and the guy, he was so exasperated by the end. Of course, he's bald, and he's like, just like trying to pull his hair out. And I thought, well, I feel the same way because it was so, to me, that was a better scene than the mirror scene. I'll be honest with you. That to me was better. It was so well done. And I, like you, I couldn't keep track of it between the hands and the pockets and the legs and the hats. I thought that was extremely well done.
Yeah. Steph?
I agree that it was impeccable. And part of the reason I know that is because I felt infuriated. Like it was just so maddening. And I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God. Like,
Uh-huh.
Harpo, why? Just at a certain point, what is happening? But that's the point. And what I enjoy the quickness. That's what I like about the Marx Brothers is the quickness, whether it's the quick wit, the quick reactions, quick timing with everything. And you can't exactly keep track, and it's chaos, but it's like they have these ideas in their head, and they have a point to it, or they know what they're doing, but it's just it, to add to it too, just Harpo's expressions and how much he communicates without speech is
Mm-hmm.
just kind of crazy, because who comes up with those looks as in like yeah, it's just like this. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't have expressions of anger. Most of
No.
the time, the worst it gets is like a huh, but like he's just all yeah. It's it's this very intense kind of look
It's
to
almost
and he
childlike.
pulls in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I looked up his age, actually, because I thought he was younger in the movie.
Mm.
Yeah. Ben Mankiewicz talks about how his grandfather really did not care for Groucho. They came into a lot of arguments on the scene. But however, his father, Ben Mankiewicz's father, remembers Harpo coming over to the house. And they had a really good relationship,
Mm.
his grandfather and Harpo. And so Harpo was a little bit more diplomatic, I think, with how he was. But yeah, that's the thing. Let's talk about the actors, and then get your kind of impressions of the Marx Brothers. I'll start. I I like some of uh, Groucho's one-liners. I like some ways in which he directs the communication to confuse the individual, and then kind of bails out and says, "Well, if you need a minute and a half, then I'm not sure I have the time to do." He kind of drags people in that, but you're right. I think a little of him goes a long way,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Chico, I have a hard time following him, only because I think it's a bit of pandering. I mean, in that day and age, in 33, it was probably appropriate or culturally appropriate to kind of take on caricatures of
Mm-hmm.
nationalities, and not so much this age. So when I see it, it feels a little aged. And so I have a hard time connecting with Chico, although he has a lot of funny lines in the process too. Harpo never goes old for me in this film or in any
Mm-hmm.
of the films. He's just kind of that innocent, happy go lucky person that happens to drive people nuts with what he does. Two significant things I think in this film that the actors did not have an opportunity to portray that they do in their other films. So I think you need to maybe do a search for Harpo, or excuse me, do a search for, yeah, both Harpo. He is a exquisite harp player, and none of
Mm-hmm.
that gets shown in this movie. They don't pull on that talent where they have normally in other films. And then Chico on the piano, not seen in this
Mm-hmm.
movie, is just incredible. And there are some internet clips that you can look at that will show you his skill at the piano. And so, other movies were written to put those pieces in to highlight some of the talents of the Marx Brothers besides just the slapstick. And sometimes that changed the whole rhythm of the film, but it
Mhm.
was a way that they could highlight their skills and their talents. Cindy, what's your thoughts on each of them?
Well, I agree with you, Marty. I think I wasn't aware of Chico with the piano until I researched it. But Harpo, yes, I was very aware of him playing the harp. And the only time he even got close to that was when he was plucking the piano strings at
Right.
one point. Um, I think that would have been a nice addition. Um, and I can agree with you on the not really. Um, I didn't really relate to the Chico character. I thought his accent, so to speak, was just a little much and just a little bit, I don't want to say culturally insensitive, but it just seemed not as relatable to me as well. And as I said in the beginning, a little bit of Groucho goes a long way for me. Um, I understand why, and part of it is his lines were delivered so quickly, and you almost at sometimes didn't even have a chance to absorb what he said, and he's on to the next one. It was just it was a little too intense for me, and I enjoyed the comic relief that Harpo gave. Um, the one interaction that I really did enjoy was the tattoo scene, and that was between Harpo and Groucho. And do you like that part too, Stephanie?
Oh
That
yeah,
was one of my favorites. And he's asking him about, himself. Groucho says, "Well, tell me about yourself." And he shows him a picture, a tattoo on I think it was on his arm, of himself as like a little caricature. And then he said, and then he had one on he held out his arm as this dancing girl and he made her dance and that was cute. But of course, the one that I loved best was he said, "Well, where do you live?" And he pulls open his shirt and there's a picture of a doghouse. And this real dog comes out. Oh, no, before that, I forgot. Before that, when he shows him the picture of the doghouse, Groucho leans in, he goes, "Meow." And then this real dog comes out of the doghouse and barks. And then that scared Groucho and he jumped up in the chair. Maybe it's because I'm an animal lover. And that scene caught me off guard. That was totally unexpected. And that scene probably was the one that made me laugh the most. That was my favorite.
Stephanie.
That's funny. I had that too as like the one time I think I was actually surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I have some trivia on that bit as well because originally it was going to be an outhouse, is my
Yeah.
understanding, and somebody smacks Harpo or on the back, and it
Mm-hmm.
makes the outhouse door swing open, and then you would see a real hand come in and close the outhouse door. I like the dog. I mean, I think they both would have been
Yeah.
funny, but just the dog barking out of nowhere, you're like,
Yeah. A
it
real
was.
dog coming out of his chest.
You made me laugh just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I Groucho kind of, when I was growing up, I think he holds a special place because that's the one that everyone kind of talked about or mimicked or brought in. I mean, Harpo also. Um, Chico, he's there.
Yeah.
And neither of you mentioned Zeppo, which shows how much, that's pretty much why this was his last movie with the Marx Brothers, because he was always regarded as the unfunny one, and he didn't like that. And he was very smart, and he went to actually create like some important engineering piece and was successful there. But the fact that we're not even mentioning him, there's nothing really remarkable that stands out. And I'm sorry, Zeppo. I'm sorry.
I think
Um,
Zeppo wanted to be the vocal, whereas Harpo was the harp, and whereas
Mhm.
and Minnie, there was a whole
mhm,
Broadway show called Minnie's Boys,
mhm.
based on the mother, and interesting backstory on what the mother did in terms of getting them involved in real life, how getting them involved in vaudeville, and getting them on the stage. But I think Zeppo was really trying to say, this is my instrument. It's vocal, because
Mhm.
besides Groucho, who has to sing in some of those scenes because it's directed to do that, uh, Zeppo really had the opportunity to sing. And there was, of course, another Marx Brothers, Gummo,
Mhm.
who at some point appeared in some films, if I'm got that correct. But yeah, Zeppo said, no, I'm out. I'm going to go, as you said, and do some really interesting things with my mind, since it doesn't seem like the movie theater or the movie cinema is my future. So
Mhm. But I did want to also just say with Groucho, I think I got so mesmerized because I took it for granted. I don't know. When you're younger, you take things for granted that like that's facial hair. That's his real facial hair. And
yeah,
so it was really striking me. I was so mesmerized by looking and just seeing how bad the stash
How
and
bad it
eyebrows
was.
are, just
Yeah.
but that also lends it to the, itself to the character. But I was trying to see under it. And I think I was trying to figure out what he looked like and what he would be like when he wasn't Groucho, the
Mm.
performer. Um,
yeah, yeah. In there, I think there was reasons why he went with just the face paint, the or paint, to kind of accentuate this fake mustache. Later in life, of course, he had a mustache, and Groucho was the longer surviving one, or at least in the public arena. He kind of had a tragic end. Some of us might have been reintroduced in the '70s to Groucho through Dick Cavett. And you can go and find like the Dick Cavett interviews with Groucho. And, he talks about the later films. I don't know if we're going to ever do another Marx Brothers film, maybe. But he talks about Groucho, the kind of running joke is he didn't really want to do more movies, but Chico needed the money because he raised a lot of gambling debts in his life. And then they would set it up, and Harpo would go, come on, let's help him out. And then they would recruit Groucho to come in and do another film, so he could basically, Chico could get some income and pay off some debts.
Mm.
Groucho, however, got associated with a paramour, Aaron Fleming, who was a longtime companion. People would go over to Groucho's house, and Aaron would be there, and she started to push him out the door and say, you need to get out. And so she got him connected with appearances, some of them rather campy, but Dick Cavett was not one of them. It in the '70s, where she got him going and getting more of a presence, and of course it brought in income, and that kind of also raised his own personal self-esteem because he was being adored by people again after many years. We know he had that game show, You Bet Your Life, in the
Oh, that's right.
50s,
Yeah.
60s. Yeah. What? Oh, the duck comes
Forgot
down.
about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Duck comes down, you win $100. Um, Aaron Fleming, though, had all sorts of mental issues. She has a bit part in Woody Allen's Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. And she plays the role of the woman who is in the back seat of a car. Let's just put it that way. At the end of the film, that kind of comic bit.
Mm.
Um, and but she had some severe, I think, mental health issues. She died by suicide in 2003. Um,
Mm.
but was kind of her, and Groucho had been gone by then, but Groucho really heavily relied on Aaron to the point where people were questioning whether or not she was taking, and maybe might have been taking, fiscal advantage of Groucho and her experiences with it. Let's look at a wrap. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the film or things that you have in your notes?
Well,
One thing I'll
Marty,
say.
go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, Steph, and then Cindy.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so as I said early at the beginning of the show, that there was less evidence of the type of humor, being so off of what we would accept today, but there were a few. And first of all, I don't understand all the body shaming because with Mrs.
Mm,
Teasdale, because that's
Yeah,
just, that didn't make sense to me anyway. But not that it's ever appropriate, but it's just like, I don't know. It
that
didn't make sense.
happens with Margaret Dumont in every Marx Brothers film.
Okay.
mm,
I was wondering too if maybe it was just that she was also so tall, but anyway, it didn't. That it's just like now. The other thing was I didn't understand when Harpo, he's riding and it's Paul Revere's ride and he sees the woman, and I was searching to see did they have a run in with her to establish that they had some sort of connection, because he just walks in there and is like, oh, I'm gonna pounce on you, and she's just like, oh, my husband, hide in the bathtub, and it's like, what? Some random guy comes into your apartment, into your
Yeah,
home, and you're just like, oh, cool, yeah, let's get down, and your husband's on his way home and you're just like, yeah, in the bath. It was a little weird, especially when Harpo comes in, he's like, "Rah," and he's like, I'm gonna get you. It was a little ew, but for the most part, um, the humor stood up, and it was deeper than a lot of that. I mean, or not, but it was more clever if it wasn't deeper.
yeah. Cindy.
I'm glad Stephanie brought that point up because I thought the same thing. And I thought to myself, was that the peanut vendor? He kind of looked like him, but I thought, no, was it? Or was it just some random man? I'm really not sure at this point. I might have to go back and watch that again. But I had the same feeling about that. I thought, oh, that's really inappropriate. And then the next scene, it shows, was it the same woman kind of hanging out the window and calling him up to her room? I'm thinking, is that the same woman or is that a different woman? And then, of course, they showed, the final scene there with the shoes, his shoes, and her slippers, and the horse hooves by the bed, and he's sleeping in bed with the horse. And I thought, ooh, where did that come from, and how are they going to get away with that? That whole thing seemed really a little inappropriate, and I had the same feeling as you, Stephanie. Like, wow, who was that woman, and why was that scene even put in there? That was a little much for me. And I agree too with the body shaming. They kept making remarks, she was bending over the stove and, oh, I can't see the stove. And I thought, well, that's really not. She was not a fat woman. She was tall in stature. She was not a petite woman, but I thought the same thing. There was a lot of body shaming going on. And of course, the clothing those women were wearing. Who was the other one?
Vera or
Yeah, Vera. I mean that the one scene she kept clutching her dress. I thought, is it gonna fall off? What's happening with that dress? I mean, they were very revealing, almost like Marty. If you remember when we talked about Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot, I thought,
Hmm.
wow, those dresses are something else, and that's all you ever saw them, and they were very yeah, revealing. So I had that same reaction as you did. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure we would be able to get. I think when I hear some of the concerns that you have, I think that was pre-code. I mean,
Hmm.
if it was post-code, that horse would not be in a bed, or the implication of a
Right.
horse being in a bed.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so they managed to, the writers managed to get a lot of things probably into the film that normally wouldn't get
Mm.
into the film. Yeah, I have to admit, Margaret Dumont is the foil in many of the Marx Brothers films, and her size and her commanding nature in most of the film. She plays the strong, big, challenging woman that generally Groucho has to engage with in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. His tactic to deal with her is around the body shaming piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just looking, married. I can imagine us being married. I see you bending over a hot stove. I can't see the stove. I mean, there were lines like that
No.
that kind of attach themselves to that kind of body shaming. This film is saved in the it's inducted into the U.S. National Registry in 1990, and it's ranked
Mm-hmm.
number 5 in AFI's 100 laughs. Number 5,
Mm-mm.
Cindy.
Nope. I agree to disagree. It's not in mine. Nope.
I was going to say, it's not in Cindy's
No.
funniest
Mm-mm.
movie.
I tell you though, and this in the beginning before we came on air, I said there were a couple things that I thought were funny that probably nobody else thought were funny, and maybe it's inappropriate or just stupid in my mind. But the very, very, very beginning when they were introducing the cast and they had the little ducks fly across and they quacked, I laughed out loud at that. I thought, no, isn't that silly? The little ducks quacking. And I laughed at the ducks floating around in the duck soup until I realized those are live ducks in a
And
pot of
there's a
hot
flame
water with a
underneath.
flame underneath. But I mean, like I said, I laughed at some of those really kind of silly things that weren't, I don't know if they were supposed to be funny or not, but but that's just my humor. I found those two things funnier than some of the one lines.
Okay, so
But
Cindy, imagine you're
yeah,
in a movie theater with a
yeah,
hundred other people, and the credits roll, and each time, and you're excited because you know it's Marx Brothers, and you know their previous films, and it's going to be wild and wacky and crazy,
yeah.
and Groucho Marx comes up, his name comes up on the screen, and a duck quacks.
Yeah, and I would laugh. And I did laugh
Yeah,
at that. That
yeah.
was hysterical to me. It's like, oh my God, a duck's quacking.
That's getting people wound up for the movie, and a bucket of soup with live ducks floating around in it.
Yeah,
That's getting people set up for the film. So
yeah,
such it is.
yeah.
I am going to pull and say maybe what we need is a palate cleanser for the next
Yes.
movie.
Okay,
And we
good.
didn't discuss this. We didn't discuss this before
No, we
before
did
the
not.
show. So usually we would have it figured out by now. Do you have a suggestion? I have two in my
Me?
head. Yeah.
I have a lot of them, Marty. Give me a uh, an actor or a time frame.
Well, here's the two that I was thinking of,
Okay, you
and I
tell.
think you'll be full approval.
Oh,
Um,
good.
they they follow that damn Cary Grant thread.
I love
Um,
Cary. I You can't go wrong with Cary Grant. Go
okay.
ahead.
Well, I, I I'll tell you. Well, I won't tell you what my preference is.
Okay.
The Philadelphia story
Mm-hmm.
is one that I think we could do, or
Mm-hmm.
um, bringing up baby.
Very different.
I know.
Oh.
That's why I thought of them.
Oh, I'm gonna go with bringing up baby.
Yeah, I
But
thought
I'll
you
do
would.
Philadelphia. Yeah, I know, but I'll do Philadelphia story if you'd like.
No, no, we'll do bringing up baby. We'll say Philadelphia story. I, I, There's a lot of Philadelphia story I don't get, and is kind of scenes that are taxing in it, but it's considered a classic, and I think we
Oh,
should
yeah.
talk about it.
Are there other
Eh,
Cary Grant ones you were thinking of, or you just
no, those were the two that popped,
you
and I
two?
wasn't thinking let's think deliberately Cary Grant. I was thinking
Hmm.
let's get a palate cleanser in here for you. So let's do bringing up baby.
Okay.
All right. Stephanie, thanks for joining.
Thank you. This was really fun. I appreciated it.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining us for the show and for saying at some point in our conversations, oh, yeah, duck soup. So, and I didn't get the origins of that, but I sensed you saw some of it when you. So to close out, what's your story around why you came with the connection to duck soup?
So when I was in eighth grade, well, I'll take you back even further. My parents, both from Brooklyn, and my dad, this was his humor. This was a lot that of what he grew up with, and so I think he was already kind of ready, chomping at the bit to educate the next generation. Um, when I was in eighth grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Spalding, and every time I would talk about my class, even though it's from animal crackers, my dad would say, "Hooray for Captain Spaulding, the African explorer." And so every time, and I think it was just a natural progression. And when I would ask him about it, and he'd be like, "Yeah, that's animal crackers, but you got to watch Duck Soup." So, from the library, you could borrow any movie at the time. And so that's how it came into my living room and into my brain. And also, again, I think I've mentioned this on other podcasts, but I did not realize in eighth grade that not every other eighth grader knew the Marx Brothers or Duck Soup or would get any references I made to it. Um, that's how I got to watch it. That's how it became something, and really it sticks with you, especially when I drive up and down 90 and past Fredonia, New York.
Ah,
Okay.
So then the song comes back, and then it stays with you for all of that time, which also they didn't like it. They told them, your
yeah.
movie title is ruining our city, and they said, well, your city's ruining our movie.
Hmm.
Which I like.
So, Cindy, any final words?
I'm glad we're going to have a change of pace for the next one. It's a screwball comedy, but not in the same way. And I love Katharine Hepburn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm looking
I,
forward to
I
it.
think I like her better in that movie than I do like her in Philadelphia Story.
Okay.
Yeah, that I think is the issue for me with Philadelphia Story. And of course, Philadelphia Story was redone into a musical, essentially, at one point with Bing Crosby and I forget who. Sinatra. Um,
Mm.
and it was based on the same sort of plot
Yeah.
and
Would
such.
like
So
that as well. No.
no, I didn't care for it. So thanks for joining us into another deep dive of Hollywood's golden age. Next time, it's going to be Bringing Up Baby. You can subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/fade to chat at symbol fade to chat. Share your reflections via email. You can send us an email at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com and look for us on your podcast servers if you want to listen to just the audio of this. All of the information that we have will include in the show notes. So it's not just the video you're going to watch, or the audio you're going to listen to. Check the notes out, and we will have connections in the show notes about the films that we're talking about. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Fade to Chat, and keep the projectors rolling.